Spiteful Dead!
Last time on Let's Play the Spiteful Dead, we had a confusing encounter with Everett as he explained how the god of life had died while at the same time raping Alicia. He went on babbling how he wanted to die, forcing our heroes into a difficult battle. The heroes failed, but they were able to continue on to the airport where the rescue chopper was waiting. And just as they were lifting off, they were greeted with a surprise. Sophie was still alive, having been rescued by Nasagi. Unfortunately, Nasagi's previous actions had left her with a deadly guilt, and she stayed behind to fall victim to the nuclear strike. Our heroes managed to get off the island in time, and with Belize behind them, it seemed our heroes would finally have a chance to relax. That is, until... Something tells me this isn't the end. Oh, at last we get to meet the President. That's quite a stage you got there, Mr. President. Ah, this is where they're placing the blame on another country for the nukes. Yep. One would think the crowd would be cheering some by now. Oh, please. Well, that was a nice little touch, the way he had to pause in the middle of that cheer to thank them. Okay, now who's talking? Last night? It's only been since last night? What? Did the heroes just die? I'm beginning to have a hunch about who this guy is. Yes, I get it. We're at sea. Okay, so they're not dead. Not all of them. That's bright. What? Huh? Apparently that is the end of the game. Well, the game is awesome. It's definitely going to remain my favorite RPG Maker game so far. But this has just been confusing, the end. Unless this was a bad ending because I couldn't defeat that one guy. I guess I'll just let this credits go on further, I guess. Talk more about what I thought of the game. I mean, it definitely had its bummer moments, like all the black screens, all the dark rooms where I couldn't see what was going on, and sometimes the enemies became redundant. But the story is definitely very good. Except for the end. Well, I'm guessing that what's going on here is this is like a cliffhanger and you were planning a sequel. Although I haven't heard anything about a sequel so far. Is there going to be a sequel? Well, if there was going to be a sequel, you probably would have said something by now, but for quite a while I avoided the pavilion. So maybe you did announce something. Maybe you are working on something. I don't know. You definitely let it open for a sequel. That's gotta be, like, the biggest disappointment ever. I mean, it would have been a better ending if it had ended after the Emperor sacrificed himself. We would have been left in the dark as to what was going on, like we are now, but it would have been much more satisfactory. Because at least then, we would have had some, what's the word I'm looking for? Something similar to conclusion. Closure. We would have had closure for the Emperor. Emperor Xisthruos. But instead we got this whole sudden scene about how the one god died, and this one guy is suddenly wanting to die for who knows why. All of a sudden war is beginning. I don't know, I'm not entirely sure I like this ending. Because this ending doesn't really have any closure. H-Tech. Tell you what I'm gonna do though. I'm gonna reset this because I wanna find out what happens if I do manage to defeat that guy. It means going through a possibly lengthy cutscene again. But this time, I'm not gonna hold all out. I'm gonna use all my most powerful stuff, my attacks that does 600 damage, my decimator and all that. How powerful was the decimator? I forget. I don't know, but I'm gonna use all that to take down that middle guy as fast as I can because he clearly has the most powerful attack. So, I'll meet you back at that boss battle. Okay, so here we are again. Well, thankfully the last save was right before fighting this guy, so I didn't have to go through all that stuff about stuff. Oh, I forgot I had that. That could have proven useful. Anyway, we'll use this to try to take down this guy as fast as we can. 200 damage. Do we have anything better? Yeah, we'll save that. Actually, let's go ahead and see if it works. And I forgot we had this thing that poisons everybody. And the decimator. I don't know if that worked because I forgot to check the one thing. And we're gonna keep my health maxed out, using the most powerful thing. And we'll use the pipe bomb. And the decimator. His attack increased. And then of course they stole my MP, so I'll use the flamethrower. We're not worrying about HP at the moment, so where's that other ammo box? Ammo crate. Thank you. Now, what's the most damaging spell? 125. 320, sounds good to me. Decimator again. Ow. Figures he'd have something like that on his hand. No. He's still alive. Drat. Okay, what we're going to have to do here is have everybody heal. Well, except Robert. He can do that. Ambrosia for herself, Ambrosia for himself, Ambrosia for himself. Darn, that didn't kill him still. Gigavolt on Everick. Ambrosia. Ambrosia. Decimator. Yeah! I might have a chance at this. And that was the end of the Decimator. Ooh, that would have stung. It would have stung like that. I doubt confusion will work, so we'll use the ammo crate again. Actually, he should probably... Nah, have him use that, and he can use... No, I don't know what he can use. Nah, just toss that. Enough of these critical hits. Why did I use the big mouth bass? I can totally win this. I forgot what I was doing. I guess next we're using the pipe bomb. Dread is attacking first. Well, poison, that's certainly not going to help. Gigavolt, she's usually faster. So what I'm going to do here is Ambrosia, and he's gonna cure himself of the poison, and he's gonna use another pipe bomb. Alright. Things are looking up. This is probably the toughest boss battle I've encountered in RPG Maker. I totally welcome the challenge. Oh, where did the things go? Oh, wait. This big weapon definitely helped. This Gigavolt weapon. Another ammo crate for her. And I'm gonna throw another pipe bomb. So I guess this is sort of the final battle. And then an Ambrosia. Oh, I win! Received the Oracle? But I won! So I played through the rest of the game, and as it turns out, the ending didn't really change. And the Oracle didn't seem to do anything whenever I tried using it. So I was rather confused on the matter, and I wound up asking Xisthruos what was going on with that. Here's what he had to say. It's been a long time since I even touched the Spiteful Dead, 2003 I think, but if memory serves, there is only one ending. I intentionally said it so that the player would still see the ending regardless of whether or not they had won the final battle. I did this because I was concerned I had made the last fight too difficult. In hindsight, this move was probably not necessary. The Oracle does nothing, unfortunately, and I can't even remember if I had any purpose intended for it. There were a lot of ideas in the Spiteful Dead that I never managed to develop or implement fully, like the scene at the police department second time. It was interesting and bizarre, but didn't really get absorbed into the plotline. You have to understand that after a year of development and over 600 hours of work, I was very eager to release the game, even if it was rough around the edges. I want to add that, as a lot of time has passed, I have had time to reflect critically on the strengths and shortcomings of the game. It was an achievement for a freshman in high school, but I would like to think I've moved on and am capable of better things now. For example, I would never again make a game with such lengthy dialogue scenes. Hope that answers your question. It's been years since anyone asked me about the Spiteful Dead. Xisthruos. The optimist proclaims we live in the best of all possible worlds. The pessimist fears this is true. Forward. Reply. So there you have it. No matter what you do, the end of the game proceeds the same and the heroes get completely screwed over. Isn't that a bummer? Well, that may be the end of the game, but it's not the end of the LP. Coming up in the next mini-sode, I give my final review of the game, and we have an interview with the creator. See you there! It was over 6 years ago when I first played the Spiteful Dead. I only got as far as the tank standoff back then, but from what I managed to play through, I came away quite impressed. I can't tell you whether it was the development of Xisth or the car chasing game, maybe it was both, but this easily became my favorite RPG Maker game, and I would often recommend it to those looking for an epic quest. So how does this game hold up now that I've actually played all the way through it? It sucks. No, I'm kidding. Now, before we begin, I'd like to warn everybody that this is not going to be a spoiler-free review. This is mostly for the game creator as well as anybody who's watched through the LP or already played the game. Preferably the latter. With that said, let us begin. We'll start this off the same way the game did, with the story. We start off with Robert being tricked by Nasagi into assassinating the President and becoming a wanted man. In a way, I guess he's kind of lucky he was framed, or else he might have been somewhere worse off when the zombie outbreak began. Not much to comment on though, but it was oh so satisfying when Mayor Mazalis finally met his end. Never before had I wanted a bad guy to die so much. That jerk deserved his fate. Then we have the relationship between Robert and Alicia. Once again, not a lot to say about it, but I was definitely rooting for them to kiss and make up. And it was certainly disheartening when Alicia found Robert naked with Nasagi and assumed the worst. Speaking of Nasagi, well, she's a ninja, so she's automatically cool. But that whole ordeal about her face magically healing and then later magically unhealing just baffles me to no end. Benjamin confuses me too, but not in the same way. He confuses me because he seems like an interesting character, but I can't really point out why. I guess that's saying something for the main cast though. I think he did a good enough job making each of them distinguishable enough to remember how each of them was like, including the bad-mouthed weapons shop owner and the little girl Sophie. Although, it didn't really seem that Sophie had any real reason to be there. Her most prominent moment wasn't even part of a required cutscene. Now let's talk a moment about the Order. What a confusing bunch of characters these are. Not as confusing as Erdrick, of course. That guy takes confusing to a whole new level. But the game never seems to go into detail with who the Order is, or at least not that I can remember. Adana is quite a forgettable character, and Ikana is almost as just. However, Ikana is definitely memorable for being a complete douchebag. Has he no sympathy? Incidentally, I recently found out what a douche actually was. I feel kinda dirty calling someone that, but believe me, it's totally well deserved. Finally, we move on to Xisthruos, easily the best character in the game and easily being a part of the most interesting subplot. One of the things I remembered most since my original attempt at this game was Xisthruos' development, how he went from being a slightly intelligent super zombie to becoming a downright sinister being. I was certain that he would grow in power and intelligence even further, eventually becoming a threat to the world, and we'd have to fight him in an epic final battle. But the fact that he has a moment of enlightenment, remembers his past, and dare I say, becomes our tortured friend, just impresses me to no end. Speaking of endings, I definitely say that Xisthruos' sacrifice would have made a much better ending than having the heroes get shut down. Not that it was a bad ending per se, it's just that I didn't really get the same feeling of satisfaction I would have had there been more closure. Instead, we're left on a freaking cliffhanger. That and the events leading up to it were confusing. I mean, one moment we're saying a sad farewell to Xisthruos, the next we're buying items from Quicksand, and we proceed to get a lecture from Edric about life, and oh by the way, he raped Alicia while he was at it. Did I miss something? Overall though, definitely an epic quest, and I myself didn't mind the long-windedness of some cutscenes, though that certainly didn't help much with cliffhangers. Quite a lengthy game this turned out to be, 23 episodes, and that's pretty much how many hours it took for me to play through. It takes less time for me to beat Final Fantasy IV. By the way, Dual Pro, did you ever get around to playing this game? I recommended it to you like a dozen times. Anyway, let's move on to the setting. Good job on presenting a modern-day world, especially when RPG Maker is tailored towards fantasy RPGs. There wasn't a single moment in the Spiteful Dead where I did not feel like I was fighting in modern times. Also gotta give you kudos for the decorations. Your buildings weren't anywhere near as bland as what I created. I mean, hey, you did good. The library definitely is what impressed me the most, and one of the things I would talk about years after my initial attempt at the game. Seriously, it may not be as apparent on the lower levels, but once you get to the balconies, you really do get a great sense of scope. It's too bad you couldn't use that talent on all the black cutscenes that took place. I know RPG Maker couldn't quite do what you wanted, but you could have tried to come close. The most recent example being the hallway with the hidden passage to Xisthruos. I don't know why that scene had to be dark, but if it was because of the hidden door, you could have tried using the solid square, black and transparent, to show the recession in the wall. Or heck, a transparent rope. While I'm on it, I gotta apologize for all the times I complain about dark rooms. Especially since you explained the reason for the issue way back at episode, 4? That's what I get for recording the whole LP ahead of time. Anyway, this is starting to get a little long, so let's move on to the gameplay. First off, when I originally played this game, I rather sucked. I lost at the library twice. Maybe I've since gotten better at RPGs, or maybe the game was balanced more, but I managed quite well this time. I think you managed fairly well with the difficulty curve. Enemies seem to be getting more and more powerful towards the end of the game, but with all their magic spells and status inflictions. But there wasn't a lot of variety of them. I know that the game's all about zombies, but you showed towards the end that you had the creative room for other baddies to encounter. Maybe we could have had other sorts of zombies. Zombie dogs, maybe? Also, I might have removed the rest points from later on in the game. They made it really easy to heal up between battles, though it'd probably be difficult to explain why you could no longer sleep on Robert's table. And I know my inventory was full at the end of the game, but you didn't give out too many items. I just tend to be afraid of using all my items, and they tend to pile up. That and frequent trips to Robert's table helped. As for the bosses, they were challenging enough, and actually quite enjoyable. In fact, even though I didn't know it was the final battle at the time, the final battle is probably the most difficult encounter I've had in these LPs so far, without being unfair. Was definitely a fun battle as a result. Same with the Phoenix battle, though it would have been nice had I remembered to use the Phoenix feather once in a while. The gun system was a great idea. Technically, it's nothing that special, but it makes that much more difference to spice up the typical MP system. And they were certainly powerful enough too. I absolutely love the flamethrower. Same goes for Benjamin's lore too. Plenty of spells to choose from, and plenty of them useful, even with the HP cost. It's just too bad the Astral lore type glitched out. Oh, and we can't forget status attacks. Those things saved my skin a few times. If only I had thought to make use of them more often. Poison proved to be especially effective against bosses, which is nice because poison is usually the attack nobody wants to use. That's the problem with a lot of commercial RPGs. They've trained you to never trust status attacks. Okay, time to start wrapping this review up. The puzzles, there isn't much to say. The door locks at the police station was an interesting idea, and placing books in the library was a little tedious, but that's about it. But the minigames, oh wow, the minigames. First off, the car minigame was a smash, pun totally intended. So fun mowing down zombies with the car, and finding the secret tokens definitely helped make things interesting. And capture the flag was pretty fun as well. But the most impressive would definitely have to be the tank puzzle one. I've said it before and I'll say it again, you could make a whole game just based off that. Unfortunately, the shootout minigame was a complete miss. And miss. And miss. And miss. Rock, paper, scissors is a good little minigame in concept, but not when it's part of the main quest. Instead, it should be restricted to being a little side thing at an amusement park or something. In the end though, I gotta give this game an A for awesome. The story was epic, the setting was executed flawlessly, and the minigames were a mostly blast. I just wish you had toned down on casual swearing a bit. Or a lot. Although I think I was the same way at your age, so I forgive you. So that's my review. The Spiteful Dead is still a good game and still my favorite RPG Maker game. You hear that, Xisthruos? Yeah, guess what everybody? Xisthruos is here and we're going to go ahead and interview him now. Follow me! Hey there, I'm starting what is hopefully going to be a new feature for my LPs, where I do a little interview with the creators of the games I'm playing. Looks like you're first up. How does it feel to know that your game is my favorite RPG Maker game, and I decided to let's play it? Were you surprised? I've been aware for some time that a small number of people whom I've never met like the Spiteful Dead, even despite its obvious flaws. So, I was mostly surprised that someone would spend so much effort recording detailed videos about somewhat obscure homebrew games. It's probably a thankless task most of the time, but I'm sure the creators appreciate it. For me, it's given me the opportunity to review a project I haven't thought about in a while. You had me really hooked with the game's story, especially the plot revolving around Xisth. What inspires such an epic quest? The story of the Spiteful Dead has two main components. First, the story on the surface that involves our main characters in a modern setting, and second, the historical and mythological backstory underneath that surface. The historical backstory was absorbed from an aborted RPGM project I had worked on from 2000 to 2001, which took place in a standard fantasy setting. Eventually, I wasn't happy with this project, and decided to work on a different one with a zombie-style theme. Instead of closing the lid on the world I had worked on for nearly a year, I decided it would be kind of neat to use the exact same world, but several hundred years in the future, where technology resembles our own. Xisth, the Order, Goddess Amalia, and certain other things that would be too obscure to name were key elements to the story of the old game. So, on the surface, you have the story about Robert and friends escaping an island filled with zombies, which is good enough on its own, but there are also occasional glimpses in the world's past and how that seems to influence what the main characters have to deal with that at that given moment. You never see the gods you hear about, but you're led to believe that they, or something like them, must be shaping the world you're in. It gives an extra dimension to the story, and hopefully gives the player the sense that anything is possible. The public wants to know, how much system data did you have left over when you finished the game? I can't remember exactly, but I do remember having to keep close watch on my remaining system data, and periodically having to skim off the edges from older maps to create enough data space for new ones. Near the end of the game, I recycled maps from very early in the game, but I was careful to do it in a way that would still seem fresh. Who was Everick? We only met him twice, and both times we simply fought him. Likewise, we never met any of the other races mentioned in the game's history. Everick? Here is some info about Everick I could and should have included in the Spiteful Dead. Everick is a man born with certain peculiar powers that make him near omnipotent. He lived a normal life up until middle age, even getting married, but all of a sudden he became aware of his abilities and his personality took a drastic change. I'll spare you too much detail, but he basically erased his life as a man by killing all of the people who knew him. He is now exceedingly amoral and likes to pretend that he is a god. He's confused about his power though, and his dialogue in The Spiteful Dead was filled with all sorts of meaningless rants about the nature of the universe and everything else. He does actually know more than the normal human would, but there's more than enough BS in what he says to cloud the facts. Xisthruos and Asagi are actually similar in nature to Everett. However, I think that's a little too much info for now. Races: humans now dominate the planet. Elves and fairies have either died out or have been absorbed into human culture to the point where they are indistinguishable. The demons live separately of humans entirely, in a far-off desert continent. They live mostly underground. I had plans to make a demon character a main character in the sequel. Were there plans for a sequel? If so, what was going to happen next? There were plans for a sequel as early as 2002, but I wasn't happy with all of the game editors that were available, RPGM included, and my living conditions had changed, making it difficult for me to work on any project. At this point, it would be nice to have a sequel to Spiteful Dead in any format, just to have some sense of closure, but it would be difficult to make a worthy sequel that wouldn't turn into a big time sink for me. Even a short game would take a lot of time. The original game set the stage for a sea change kind of thing, but not necessarily an apocalypse. The sequel would be the events leading up to that sea change, would give a lot more info about Everett and the Order, showcase a lot more geography, and would end once the final judgment is passed on humanity and the world shifts to another phase of history. In the sequel, the zombie menace has continued to grow, but humans have found a way to cope. Bigger threats are found in the introduction of new varieties of vicious monsters and abnormal weather patterns that strike without warning. Civilization still thrives in certain parts of the world, but everyday life is slowly becoming more materialized and chaotic, or militarized, I should say. The Order is no longer a shadow organization and has stepped in to assume control over failing governments. Alicia, Max, and the helicopter pilot died in the crash. Robert survived but was separated from Ben. Now Robert travels around the world with his demon companion Lynn, accepting dangerous jobs hunting monsters and criminals. Ben escaped with Sophie and he raised her as his daughter. When the sequel begins, Sophie is in her late teens, and Ben has begun using his magical knowledge to aid Everett. Paper or plastic? Paper is too easy to break free of, while plastic makes suffocating the target easy, but doesn't decompose quickly enough. I prefer using my bare hands and then eating the victim. Ugh! Throw him hard. I said hard. So long. Oh, that sucked. That might have been... It was right around here. That was good.